Welcome to today's story time. Today's story is titled The Market Incident Part 2. Amara chased after her boss, hoping they could search the market together. When they arrived, it was eerily quiet as if were a non-market day. They scoured every nook and cranny of the nearly deserted market, but Chiamaka was nowhere to be found. With no other options, they returned home. Back at the Okafor's residence, Mr. Okafor had not yet returned from his meetings. After waiting for a while, Mrs. Okafor retired to bed, sternly instructing Amara to ensure her daughter was found by morning. Mr. Okafor arrived home later, unaware of his daughter's absence, and also went to bed. Meanwhile, at the market, Stephen realized it was late and decided to take Chiamaka out of hiding, bringing her to Mama G. Mama G was a well-known figure in the area, often taking in homeless and orphan children, albeit for her own benefit. She used these children to sell as cigarettes and gin, demanding that they return with either money or unsold products on time, or face harsh punishment. She would release them at 13, claiming they had learned enough to survive on their own. Stephen, a former protege of Mama G, knew she would take Chiamaka in for the night if he offered to pay. He pleaded with Mama G, offering her money to keep Chiamaka safe until morning. Mama G agreed, and Chiamaka was given some snacks before being put to bed. Stephen returned to his hideout, but Chiamaka struggled to sleep, crying for her mother and the comfort of her bed. The next morning, Stephen rushed back to Mama G to retrieve Chiamaka. Mama G was relieved to be rid of the spoilt brat, who had cried all night, even returning Stephen's money. Stephen asked Chiamaka if she remembered her home address or a phone number. Though she didn't know the address, she recalled her parents' phone numbers. They headed to a phone booth, but Chiamaka could only remember the first few digits of her mother's number. Then, they tried her father's number. At home, the Okafors had left for work early, as was their habit. Unaware of the ongoing search for Chiamaka, Mrs. Okafor, however, reminded Amara to find her daughter. Amara returned to the market, searching all day with her friend's help, before heading back to prepare the dinner. Stephen and Chiamaka continued trying the father's number. When it finally connected, the call was answered by Mr. Okafor's PA, who was instructed to ignore unknown numbers. Eventually, Mr. Okafor, annoyed by the persistent calls, turned off his phone. As dusk approached, Stephen and Chiamaka needed a safe place for the night. Chiamaka, traumatized by her previous night at Mama G's place, begged to stay with Stephen. They wandered until Chiamaka fell asleep, eventually finding shelter under a small store. Back at the Okafor's house, Mrs. Okafor, tasked with reviewing thesis papers, decided to stay overnight on campus. She called Amara, instructing her to lock up as she wouldn't be home. Mr. Okafor, returning home, went straight to bed, unaware of the day's events. In the market, Stephen and Chiamaka were nearly hit by a car. The two men inside, relieved they were unharmed, offered them a place to stay. Stephen pretended to be Chiamaka's older brother, and they were taken to a house where they overheard the men planning to use them for rituals. Stephen devised an escape plan, which they executed the next morning at a fueling station. Back home, Mrs. Okafor woke up and asked Amara about Chiamaka. Mr. Okafor, just learning of his daughter's disappearance, remembered the missed calls. They called the phone booth, learning that Stephen and Chiamaka had been there. The attendant promised to alert them if the children returned. Later, Stephen returned to the phone booth and the attendant informed him of the call. They dialed Mr. Okafor's number and Amara spoke with Chiamaka, promising to come get her. The Okafors rushed to the markets, reuniting with their daughter. Chiamaka insisted they take Stephen home with them, praising his help. The Okafors, moved by her words and Stephen's respectful demeanor, agreed. Stephen was enrolled in Chiamaka's school, and Amara was warned to be more careful in the future. This is the conclusion of the market incident story. I hope you enjoyed it. Remember to support my channel with your likes, comments, shares, and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next story time, goodbye.